Chairperson Agrasin will not be here today, so we will first need to take a motion to elect the chairperson pro tem. However, before we do that, I'd like to read the following statement. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937.
Could you please start over? Your mic wasn't on.
It is on. Can you hear me?
Are you able to hear him?
It's on.
Could you hear now? Would you say something, Mr. Imran?
Can you hear me?
We're good to go.
All right, so you want me to start all over?
Yes, please.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission meeting for Monday, April 25th, 2022. My name is Yazdan Emrani. I'm the Director of Public Works for the City of Glendale. Chairperson Agrasin is not here today, so we will first need to take a motion to elect the chairperson pro tem. However, before we do that, I'd like to read the following statement. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting these questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person during this meeting. And with that, I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:05 p.m. Maybe we have a roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Nazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner Lester?
Yes.
Commissioner Bonston?
Yes.
Thank you.
So at this time, we need to have a motion for a chairperson pro tem.
Okay, I'll make the motion. Do I have to? Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we elect Commissioner Nazarian chair, right?
Chairperson pro tem, yes.
Chairperson pro tem, not chair. Okay. Sorry.
I second. This is Shauna Bonston.
Roll call.
Okay, I will take a roll call. Chairperson pro tem Nazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner Lester?
Yes.
Commissioner Bonston?
Yes.
Thank you.
Chairperson Nazarian, would you like to do the flag salute?
Yes, Tatiana is going to help me on that.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Still trying to look for my agenda in email, Tatiana, so I don't know if we have a hard copy here or... I didn't, thank you so much.
We would be at item 2, Chairperson
Okay.
Pro Tem Nazarian.
Thank you. So item 2 for posting of agenda.
Correct. I can read it. The agenda for the Monday, April 25th, 2022 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by Monday, April 18th, 2022 before 5 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Okay, we can go for item 3, approving of the minutes.
Item 3, minutes of the regular Transportation and Parking Commission meeting on February 28th, 2022.
I can make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, I will take roll call. Chairperson Pro Tem Nazarian,
Yes.
Commissioner Lester,
Yes.
Commissioner Bonston.
Yes?
Thank you.
So item 4, we have presentations.
Chairperson Pro Tem Nazarian, we have 2 presentations tonight. First one is from Metro on Doran and Broadway / Brazil Street Grade Separation Project. So we can have the Metro's representative come forward.
Evening, Commission. Brian Balderrama, Deputy Executive Officer for LA Metro's Regional Rail Division. And with the Broadway Brazil project, since it's been quite some time we updated you on the project, we wanted to give you not only a status of where we're at with the interim improvements, but update you on the ultimate configuration, what your residents are interested in, which is the grade separation projects. So we'll go ahead and start that presentation for you.
Good evening. Thank you. My name's Heather Anderson. So thank you for letting us present this evening on the updates for the Doran Broadway Brazil grade separation project. Next slide. Okay. Oh, perfect. So just to, I think since it's been a while, I'll give a quick project overview. So this project was kind of triggered based on some issues at these grade separation projects. So currently, both these grade separation projects get about 90 trains daily, causing about 7.5 hours of gate downtime weekly. The commuter rail service is anticipated to increase by 50% in 2035. There's 14 recorded incidents at Doran Crossing and 9 recorded incidents at Broadway Brazil Crossing. And so the CPUC has mandated the improvements to the Doran Crossing. But through our environmental process, we've decided to include Broadway Brazil, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as we move forward. So what this project provides is 2 grade-separated crossings, as you can see on the screen. One is designated at the San Fernando West extension and is associated with the Doran Street, and that's in the upper part of your screen you can see in the photo. And the other is a Salem-Sperry overpass, which is associated with the Broadway and Brazil at-grade crossing closure. By closing both these at-grade crossings under one project, it will eliminate long-term construction impacts and no need for a future grade separation. The combined projects also provides minimum traffic diversion by providing uninterrupted access over the railroad corridor. Lastly, by closing the 2 grade crossings, it will extend the quiet zone from Broadway Brazil through Doran. So just kind of a status update on where we're at currently at this project. So concurrently, we've been working on an interim project at the Doran Street, which will improve both pedestrian and vehicle safety at the San Fernando Road and Doran Street intersection. The final design for the interim project was approved in December 2021, and Metro anticipates construction to begin for this project this summer. For the ultimate project, it was environmentally cleared in 2018. The team is working closely with the stakeholders to address concerns on the 30% design package. We are currently coordinating with the City of Glendale on the operation and maintenance of the structural elements and formulating the operation and maintenance agreements. Once the operation and maintenance agreements are in place, the project team will be releasing the 65% design submittal for review and comment, and we're shooting for the end of spring for that submittal and the agreements to all be processed. In addition to the operation maintenance elements, the project team is coordinating with the City of Glendale on the project structural aesthetics elements, which is what we'll be discussing more detail shortly. And then lastly, Metro is looking for state and federal funding opportunities that can be implemented for this project. So I wanted to highlight and go over some of the landscaping and aesthetic elements that we've been taking a look at for this project. So the concept, a brief overview of the concept, with the LA River in close proximity to the project area, the thought would be it would be a great theme to be used for this project. It would provide unity between the City of Los Angeles and the City of Glendale. And some of the theme elements you'll see throughout the presentation are the California sycamore tree and its majestic leaf forms, the iconic great blue heron, and the distinctive cattail plant. So on this first slide, you can see this is the first structural element, and looking at mostly the MSE walls that wrap around the outer edge of the structure. The MSE aesthetics shown are located, and they're highlighted in the blue area that you can see on that outer edge. And we'll look at some blown up elements as we go through. And so then there's also, this is pretty similar to the previous slide, except for this is on the interior. But what I did want to highlight is that there are, on this slide, a lot of the elements, what we're calling it is an obscured from public view. So in locations where there's buildings or things that'll be obstructing the walls, the idea is to raise the aesthetics or the design up higher on the wall so it's still visible and not blocked by those buildings. This slide is highlighting the abutments, showing how the aesthetics design wraps around and is continuous from the MSE walls. And then if you look at the upper left corner, that's kind of more of a blow up of some of the design details, highlighting some of those elements we discussed, the river elements, the heron, the sycamore, and the cattails. This is the girder design, and the intent is there's 3 different types of girders. One is the first top one in A is highlighting the LA River as the primary inspirational element. B, the second one down, is a more unified context-sensitive solution appearance, and item C would be compatible with the community and environment. This slide is highlighting the barrier elements that would be on the bridges. And so this is just mostly the aesthetics of the cattail plant shown on the barriers. And then lastly, there's additional panels, and this would be mostly in those areas where the obscured view, where buildings would be blocking. We'd have some accentuated panels that would resemble a flowing river. You can see those blown up on the top. At locations where there was ground plane locations, we're proposing a stamped concrete that would be consistent with the stamped concrete at the Fairmont overcrossing to tie in the aesthetics. And then lastly, we've been coordinating with the City of Glendale to look at proposing trees along San Fernando Road and around the structural elements The trees proposed include the western redbud, California sycamore, and African sumach. And so thank you for listening to our presentation today, and hand it back over to Brian.
Thank you.
So if you have any questions at this time, we're happy to answer. But just to give you some insight to the interim conditions, Metro does plan to come in advance of the actual construction of those interim improvements, just so that your residents have a chance to ask any questions, particularly about closures, what's supposed to be happening for emergency safety, anything that they desire before we start.
Commissioners?
Hi, this is Commissioner Bonston. I do have a couple questions. And forgive me, I wasn't present if and when you gave a previous presentation on it months or years ago. So it sounds like the premise is to assist in driving across the railroad tracks, and so that you don't have to stop the trains or the trains don't stop traffic, right?
Correct. This is a safety improvement project because of the number of incidents that have occurred at the crossing.
Right.
We've been mandated to close that crossing and then come up with a solution.
I see.
To continue to move traffic.
So I guess my question is, and it looks like a very impressive, substantial infrastructure piece, the both of them. And I appreciated the design components that you have and the landscaping. I think in some of the renderings, the need for landscaping seems clear, and so your description of it sounds promising. I think I'm trying to wrap my head around, and I understand the safety concerns, but what does this mean for pedestrians and bicyclists? I'm curious about if that is a component of the design. If not, what does it look like for a pedestrian that would look to cross in the way that they previously would have with the streets? And then I'm a little curious too about what is near the infrastructure. There's a number of buildings and uses that are in proximity to the ramps. Just curious who owns those, or if those are private and industrial in nature, and the considerations for the design for those proximate uses.
Sure. So for your first question, when we looked at the two grade separated crossings, one for the Doran location and second for the Broadway Brazil. The Broadway Brazil location, through that overpass, it will include a pedestrian walking and biking path on the structure that is separated by a barrier that allows for that safe movement from one side, which is Sperry, to the other side, which is Salem, between the cities of Los Angeles and Glendale. For the second structure, it was intended originally to connect to your existing Fairmount structure. Since your Fairmount structure does not allow for biking or non-motorized movement, Metro board came back to staff and said the same thing. We need you to evaluate how non-motorized traffic is going to get through this area, not only for that east-west connection, but north-south as well. So Metro went back to the board with a solution. The solution was a separate project, which would allow for two separate active transportation structures. Both of those structures are currently in your general plan. One of them would span over the Verdugo Wash and would connect to your Phase 3 bike program, where you have a terminus point at the confluence of the wash. And Metro is currently working with that project with the Army Corps, because the Army Corps has a larger envision for that area of what they want to reconvert, not only through the wash, but into your city. They're hoping that they can fold that active transportation project into theirs, and Metro is waiting for a status. If they cannot, Metro will proceed forward with that project on our own. If we get the green light, that will be a separate project that is led now by the Army Corps. Metro will continue to lead the active transportation bridge that would span over Doran Street. So you would have a separate pedestrian bridge that would span over the railroad tracks along the 134 freeway. So with those three components, that will provide the active transportation needs for both the city of Los Angeles and Glendale, and provide a backbone for all of you to build the necessary infrastructure in the future along the LA River, as well as along some of your interior streets. For the second project, your second question had to do with the actual industrial buildings that surround the overpass. One of the things our Metro right-of-way division will not allow us to proceed forward with are negotiations with individual property owners until I can find 100% of my construction funding. So that's my number one mission, to look through every available source until I have the construction funding, which would allow that process to continue. But if any property is vacated and becomes open space, we have time through this design process to work with all of your departments on how those available lands should be repurposed. And it is intended in most cases that though the lands will be purchased by Metro, they will be dedicated to the individual cities where their jurisdictions reside.
Wonderful. Thank you for those two answers. And then I just have a plug, I would say. Maybe it's not a question, or it's a partial question, but a comment. It looks like you have California sycamore, western redbud, which I apologize, I don't know if that's native, but I'm pretty sure the African sumac is not native. And I just wanted to make a plug for our native trees that have canopy for shade, our general need for shade, as part of the landscaping design. Thank you.
Noted.
Yes, so thank you for the presentation. Most of the questions I had were asked by Commissioner Bonston, but I did want to ask, just to clarify, so both the Fairmont overpass and the J-hook are not going to be accessible except by motor vehicle. That's one question. Yes, so then there was the planning for the pedestrian overpass at Doran. Was that going to be accessible to bike, have a good bike access? You know, it can be tricky when you have an elevated span that the bikes have to go up. That was one other question. I participated in the public outreach for the J-hook as a member of the public, and my concern then is the same as it is now, just an overall comment, which is that this confluence area had both plans within the Army Corps project from a long time ago. There was this confluence kind of concept that was being developed. And then there's also the Verdugo bike path. And this passes right over the river, the wash, where it widens out to approach the confluence. And want to make very sure that the supports for this structure don't interfere with the possible configurations that could be designed for that bike path. And then I guess if I could just ask again, since it's been a while, so in terms of Salem-Asperry, there's a large section of Glendale that's going to essentially have to be raised in order to create this looping overpass. Could we just have real quick the rationale again for that necessity?
So you're asking for the rationale for the vertical clearance of the overpass?
No, so there's sort of it almost looks like almost a full block section that basically needs to have whatever building is cleared from it, where it loops around to then go over right up against San Fernando.
So
as opposed to, say, an underpass or, other possibilities they could have used to create a grade separation?
Sure. So during the environmental process, multiple design options were analyzed for both structures. The design that you see in front of you would have been the least impactful, going under, providing an underpass for not only the volumes between the two cities, but as well as the connections required, would have impacted more properties, both on the Glendale and Los Angeles side. Even the design that we brought in front of you has been vetted through your Public Works Department to reduce the amount of impacts even onto Concord and some of the surrounding adjacent streets. For what you were referring to as P-hook, during that design process, there was a P-hook, J-hook design option. When we went through Glendale Public Works Department, as well as your Glendale Water and Power Department, it became a security risk to have the J-hook design because there was so much overlap between the limits of the power plant that we wanted to remove that risk altogether and proceed forward with the design that you see in front of you.
So this is not the J-hook? You're saying it's the P-hook?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So to confirm that both Fairmont and this hook, this new connection, will not be accessible by anything but motor vehicles?
Correct. Okay. And then the design in itself was vetted through the Army Corps to make sure that it would accommodate their future plan, that if there was a need to put columns underneath the design that's built to at grade, it would reduce the amount of work the Army Corps had to do in the future.
Okay, so then, yeah, I don't remember if it was my second question, but it was basically, is there coordination happening between this project and the Verdugo Wash Bike?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you, Commissioners. I just have a couple of quick questions, actually, and thank you for the presentation. Really nice. And I'm having a hard time even remembering last time we saw this project here. But just to refresh my memory, when was the environmental approved on this?
The environmental would have been approved in 2019.
2019. And it looks like in a couple or 3 months, we're ready for permit and start construction?
So there were interim improvements that were required by the California Public Utilities Commission that would make the Dorn Street at-grade crossing and the Broadway Brazil at-grade crossing as safe as possible. If you recall, back in 2018, Metro came out and did some smaller improvements at the Broadway Brazil location. Most of it was signal, so a lot of the residents weren't truly impacted, but that completed all of the necessary work and integration between the rail interface as well as your signals within your city. Now, we're approaching the final design that has been approved by Metro for the at-grade improvements at Dorn Street, which would allow for a two-way configuration. Now this two-way configuration, if you drive on to Doran, the first thing you'll notice there are no pedestrian gates. There is no sidewalk on one side. These improvements that just got approved by both cities would put all of the streetscape on there, as well as all of the pedestrian and safety improvements. In addition, we're going to modify all of the vehicular gates that are out there and signage so that that crossing is as safe as possible before we allow people to go through that as an access point during construction of the ultimate grade separation project.
Okay, so the ultimate grade separation project, We haven't even started the construction document on that. Is that what I'm hearing?
We're at we're approaching a 60% final design phase
I see.
for that ultimate project. So we're about a year and a half away from.
Year and a half away. Okay, thank you, thank you. Does city need any, do you need city approval for anything for the overcrossing project, or it's environmental is clear, you finish the construction document, you start construction in a couple of years?
No, it never is that easy. Even though we have environmental approval as well as Metro Board action with support from both cities, we will still require design permitting approval by both cities in order to allow it to go into construction.
Okay, so our Public Works is gonna review the plans and they're gonna issue a permit for you?
Correct.
Okay, okay. Just a minor question about the first slide, 14 recorded acts incident and 9. Are these for 1 year? Or
This is over a 9-year period.
9-year periods, okay, that sounds much. And the properties, all the properties you mentioned that Commissioner also asked question about, you already started the negotiation on that one for?
No, we cannot start negotiation until the project is fully funded.
And what kind of funding do we have right now?
Right now, we have funding through final design, and Metro will be taking board action on issuing construction for bid, and in that process, request the construction funding for those interim improvements. So aside from the construction of the interim improvements and the final design for the ultimate configuration, Metro has not secured the funding needed for construction.
Any of the funding is coming from city here, Glendale?
To date, no. There is no, Metro has paid for 100% of the project.
And you may not have this answer, but just years of construction, what are we estimating? Once you start the overcrossing, how many years we're talking to complete it?
From beginning to end, that's not an answer I have for you right now until I could see the more advanced design plans.
Okay, and one other question regarding, I think relates to bikers and concern about that. Is there already maximum grade at this overcrossing we're considering that we know of today? Is it 5%, 6% more?
No, even for the active transportation structures, they're looking at a looping ramp in order to reduce that grade on walking and biking.
Which I'm hoping, yeah, it's gonna be
Yes.
easier for bikers, hopefully, okay. Just maybe one other question, funding detail. Are we anticipating any major, I know there's gonna be a lot of minor ones, but any major utilities or anything that is significant that impacts the city as part of this project that we know of today?
For the city of Glendale, it's a lot of drainage improvements, which you're used to on most of your projects, of trying to make sure we connect to the existing. On the city of Los Angeles side, that's a different story because they have a major trunk line that's within their jurisdiction.
Okay.
Your Public Works Department was coordinating with them to allow access through a temporary yard under the 134 freeway. So you may have seen a lot of the San Fernando West being dug up for the work
I
that was
have
being
noticed
done.
that, yes.
So that pipeline will continue to the location of our ultimate grade separation, and in order to protect it, we'll have to reconstruct it.
Okay. I think that's all for me, commissioners. Any more additional questions?
Hi, this is Commissioner Bonston. I just have a couple comments. One is to say, very supportive of a project that allows and, supports transit, rail transit in particular, access here. I would say if we were earlier in the process, I think I would ask a lot more questions about alternatives, including the undergrounding. It is a lot of infrastructure here, infrastructure upon infrastructure. And I do wonder, so it sounds like the EIR was approved in 2019?
Correct.
And what were the alternatives identified in the EIR? Was there an underground as an alternative, or was it looking at all above grade?
So the environmental process for this project extended beyond 6 years to allow for not only the alternative design configurations that kept modifying, but request on both cities to make sure that traffic and transportation for today's volumes as well as the future were taken into consideration. So there were even grade separated options that connected to the Zoo Drive on the opposite side of the river, and then let people know what the traffic patterns would look like in those cases. It turned out that your neighbors on the opposite side of San Fernando, the Atwater Village community, is sectioned into 3 different parts, and how they get out or how they're landlocked became one of the driving forces to these ultimate design options that are in front of you today.
Okay, thank you.
Chairperson Pro Tem Nazarian, I do have 2 callers on hold. Would you like to take those calls now?
Yes, please.
Mr. Eisenberg?
Good evening. My name is David Eisenberg. I'm a Glendale resident since 1985. I am very concerned about what I'm hearing about pedestrians and bicycle access. When Fairmont was built, I was in high hopes that there would be a pedestrian and bicycle access on that. And of course, as you know, there is none. And I would think in this project, there's plenty of width on that road to allow for pedestrians and bicycles to put a sidewalk and a bike lane in. Even if it doesn't have to be a full bike lane, that road is not utilized as it is. I'm concerned that in these days when we're trying to get people out of their cars and onto a bicycle or walking on foot, that you're taking 2 crossings now, and it looks like from what I'm hearing, maybe I'm incorrect, that if you get on the Duran, there'll be a crossing for you. But if you want to cross at Broadway, there doesn't seem to be any way for pedestrians to get across, which means you have to go a mile out of your way to go up to Duran, or a mile out of your way to go down to Chevy Chase to cross. This is really not something that is reasonable. So, perhaps you can tell us, where can we be involved with if the design's not final, to put a sidewalk in on this overcrossing? The same kind of bike lanes that are on Broadway, where you mark a bike lane. There's got to be something that you can do to allow access without, the separate pedestrian crossing sounds great, but it's not really great. Anyhow, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eisenberg.
So the current access the city has is Flower Street that will get you to the Los Angeles River. But that access gets you to your Phase 3 Confluence project, which at the moment gets you to the mouth of the Verdugo Wash, and you have to turn back around and go on along the LA River. The metro projects would cut that 2-mile distance of access to the LA River by providing the Doran active transportation that now gives you direct access along Doran. And at the current cul-de-sac for Doran Street right now, there's a gate, which is City of LA's maintenance road. That gate gets removed once the active transportation structures are created, and the City of LA plans to repurpose that to a multi-purpose lane, just like they have on the opposite side of the LA River. So now you have continuous access on both sides of the LA River for both cities. And then once the Salem Sperry is constructed, that's another half-mile distance that people can use to get that east-west movement and connections to the LA River and anywhere they need to within the area. There is another project by Metro, which is the LA River project. I don't have enough information to provide you on that, but the intention are improvements within the LA River that allow for Class 1 movement in addition to what you see today.
I do apologize if I mispronounce your name, but our next caller is Mr. Labriche. Mr. Labriche, you are live and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, yeah, my name is Don Labreche, and I'm a lifelong resident of Glendale. I've been here since 1955. My neighbor has been very cooperative about me trying to get flashing lights in the rose bed on La Crescent Avenue. I've been trying to get that done for 3 years. We get people that come off the freeway and they're still doing a pretty good clip, and it is dangerous. I've been told next year, and now Pastor has told me next year, but he has been cooperative. The main reason I'm calling, however, is that he was unaware of any Foothill Boulevard active transportation plan that had any design in it for a road diet where lanes will be eliminated. I told him my concern was that I had read about a proposed dedicated bus lane. So my question is, we have a plan all the way down to Lowell, all through La Crescenta, the Glendale portion and the unincorporated to the LA City line. Is there a plan to start eliminating lanes of car traffic? We have 2 in each direction right now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for the question. I think hopefully our next presenter heard that question, and hopefully they can answer if he stays online. Hopefully he can hear the answer. Thank you. Thank you so much. And any other question for this part? Thank you. Thank you very much.
We'll be back.
Mr. Chair, members of commission, excuse me, we have another presentation on Foothill Boulevard Active Transportation Program by LA County Public Works, and I'll invite him up to the podium now.
Hi, can everyone hear me now? And if you could just bring it a little closer to her. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Shirley Lai, and I'm here with my colleague, Andrew Ross, and we are from LA County Public Works. We want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening to join us to discuss the Foothill Boulevard Active Transportation Plan. We're so excited to be sharing this new endeavor with you, and we look forward to your feedback and continued participation as we develop this plan together. So our outreach tonight will consist of a short presentation, and we'll be more than happy to take questions and comments afterwards. Los Angeles County and the cities of Glendale and La Cañada Flint Ridge have partnered to develop a planning document to transform Foothill Boulevard into an active transportation-friendly corridor. By putting the time and effort into developing a comprehensive plan for the corridor, it allows us to be intentional and thoughtful about the types of investments we make in this area to really properly address the community's needs and wants. This initial planning effort will really help put all 3 project partners in a better position to seek grant funding for project construction. The Foothill Boulevard Active Transportation Plan will cover approximately 6 miles along Foothill Boulevard, starting at Lowell Avenue in the city of Glendale, traverse through the La Crescenta Montrose community, and at Oak Grove Drive in the city of La Cañada Flint Ridge. On this map, we've highlighted a couple of key major destination locations in the area, including 3 high schools, the local YMCA, USC Verdugo Hills Hospital, Descanso Gardens, and JPL. Active transportation is defined as the use of human-powered modes of transportation, with the most common forms being walking and biking. By creating more opportunities for active transportation, we can reduce our reliance on motorized vehicles, increase mobility options for the community, provide increased opportunities for active transportation and physical activity, and reduce environmental pollutants. So there are several features that we want to discuss to explore for inclusion as part of this planning effort, which I'm going to go over in the next few slides. I want to note that these are just a few examples of some of the improvements that we plan to explore for inclusion, but this by no means constitutes a full list. Bike lanes are a portion of the roadway that's designated by signage, striping, and pavement markings for the preferential or the exclusive use of bicyclists. Along most of Foothill Boulevard, Class 2 bike lanes generally do exist, but we feel that there may be an opportunity for us to upgrade the bike lanes to a striped or a more permanent barrier between the bicyclist and the motorist. Sidewalks are paved portions along the side of the road designed for the exclusive use of pedestrians by enhancing their visibility to other pedestrians. Similar to the bike lanes, the sidewalks generally do exist along Foothill Boulevard, but we believe that there is a potential to widen some of the more narrow sidewalks and include pedestrian furniture such as benches. Curb extensions or bulb outs enhance pedestrian safety by creating greater visibility and reducing the crossing distance for pedestrians. The bulb outs will also provide traffic calming measures by encouraging motorists to slow down by providing a very slight narrowing of the roadway. High visibility or continental style ladder crosswalks will also provide greater visibility to pedestrians, but unlike the curb extensions, they don't reduce pedestrian crossing distance. Raised medians with landscaping are curbed areas within the center of the roadway that encourage motorists to avoid traveling at high speeds by visually narrowing the roadway. Wayfinding signs can provide guidance to travelers to major destination locations, such as nearby hospitals and parks. An example of a wayfinding sign in the community is this sign showing directions to Descanso Gardens and the nearby hospital. Now I'm going to go over a quick demonstration of the project website. So this is our project website at pw.lacounty.gov/TPP/Foothill Boulevard ATP /. So as you can see at the top of the screen, you can see our project title, Foothill Boulevard Active Transportation Plan, and there are 3 tabs at the top showing Home, Documents, and Community Engagement. So on the Home tab, you can see there's a project overview and contact information for LA County, the City of Glendale, and City of La Cañada Flint Ridge. There's also a location for residents to sign up for email updates so they can be updated on the latest on our project. So if you click on the Documents tab, you'll see that we have an area for the existing conditions report, the draft plan, and the final plan. And as we move towards the final planning documents, we will upload the plans here accordingly. Currently, we have the draft existing conditions report available for public review. Right underneath that, we also have an area for the residents to provide us with comments, either in relations to the draft existing conditions report, or any potential improvements they would like to see. And at the bottom, we also have a project map that shows the project boundaries for the cities of Glendale, La Crescenta Montrose, and La Cañada Flint Ridge. And the last tab is for the Community Engagement tab. We have an area for any upcoming meetings, and information will be shared there for any future meetings. And we also have a tab for previous meetings. As shown on the screen, we did have our first initial community outreach meeting on February 23rd, and there are links to the flyer, the presentation materials, and the video recording. Underneath that, we have our interactive map. There is a quick disclaimer at the top, generally stating that providing name and email are optional, but if they are provided, they will be public information and can be viewed by others. So just click agree and click OK. And on the information tab, there's information on how to use this interactive map, including directions, which I will go over now. On the layers tab, there's additional options to include either the LA County street map, the terrain with the labels, or a Google imagery map. Under the comments tab is where you would enter in comments. So what I recommend, so we click on new feature, and you would drop the pin on the location that you want to include your comment on. So you can either do that by zooming in and out to the specified location, enter in the address or the intersection. So for example, if you want to add a comment here, you would click here. And under type of concern, you would click the drop-down menu and choose your type of concern and enter in your comment. Like I mentioned earlier, your first name, last name, and email is optional to be included. If you do include it, we will be able to contact you if we have any further questions on any comments that you might make. We also have an area for attachments if you have any attachments that you would like to share with us. And once you're done, click Save. Walk and bike audits are generally used as a tool to identify factors that affect walking, biking, and access to transit. A typical walk and bike audit will start with a short presentation on safety and the types of potential improvements that we'll request that participants look out for. From there, the participants will be split up into groups and asked to observe the conditions around them with respect to safety, design, and access. And some of the questions that we'll consider during the walk and bike audit will include: is there adequate space to walk and bike? Are there any obstructions or gaps? Is there adequate lighting? Is there adequate landscaping? And more importantly, does it feel safe? The information gathered from the walk and bike audit will help the planning team in determining the potential areas for improvement and any specific areas of concern to the community. Walk audits will generally be limited to 1 mile round trip, and bike audits will generally be limited to a few miles. No experience is required for either audit, but we do request that our participants who join us for the bike audit provide their own bicycles and safety gear. We anticipate each audit to last anywhere between 60 and 90 minutes, walking or biking at a leisurely pace with stops to discuss our observations. We will also be working with the local bicycle advocacy groups to assist us with the bike audits. As we continue working towards the final planning documents, we will be working with the community to solicit input on the desired active transportation improvements along Foothill Boulevard by gathering feedback from the website submissions, hosting additional outreach events as the planning effort progresses, and conducting walk and bike audits. We plan on using these suggested improvements to guide us as we work towards the final planning document. Please note that there will be several opportunities to provide feedback each step of the way. We look forward to working with you to develop an active transportation plan for Foothill Boulevard that best serves you and your neighbors. That does conclude the end of my presentation. I have the information for the project website and project contacts listed below. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions, commissioners?
This is Commissioner Bonston. I guess I have a couple questions, maybe a comment to start with. That sounds like a great idea. Foothill Boulevard, I think, certainly could use this. I'm interested to know, and I apologize if you covered it, I was thinking a lot and taking a lot of notes, but what the next steps are. And I guess I'm curious too, you showed us how comments are made. And at first my question was kind of what sort of comments might you receive? And the ones that you kind of identified it as being issues or concerns. So it sounds like members of the public in particular could comment at a particular intersection if they felt there was an issue. There were a number of comments that looked like they were already on there. So I was kind of curious, what are the comments that you're hearing so far? That's one of my questions. And then what is the next step for outreach?
Sure. So some of the comments that we received some of it had in terms to do with some of the safety. So these are things that we noticed as we conducted our field review as well, that some of the sidewalks are a little bit narrow, so it may not be as comfortable to, say, for someone in a wheelchair or mothers or parents who have strollers to really use it. So by widening that sidewalk, we could address some of those issues. Some of the others are suggestions for improvements. So we've gotten comments for street trees, including parklets, things like that. So we're taking all of this information in right now. So really, at this moment, we're in an information gathering period. And so far, we've gotten a lot of great suggestions. As for what's next, we're hoping to do the walk-bike audit, hopefully in the next few months or so. And then from there, we'll continue working on the planning documents, using the comments that we receive, and we'll have probably a few other community outreach engagements just to gather information and to receive feedback as we continue towards the final planning document.
Thank you, and I would just add the idea of parklets sound really great too, as this kind of respite for both bicyclists and pedestrians. It does get really hot up there in summer, spring, and fall months. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. This is great. This ATP projects like this are great to see. Thank you. First of all, the widening sidewalks possibility is great. There's a lot of places in the city where I believe the sidewalks have been narrowed over the years, so this is fantastic to see as part of the suggestions. To clarify, the bike lanes that you mentioned with extra paint, are you referring to a buffered type of bike lane?
Correct. So when I was discussing the options that we were looking to upgrade the bike lanes, so there is an option for us. So as we're going to be moving towards the final planning documents and kind of looking at the recommendations that we would like to make, we would look at buffered bike lanes as well. So we could either do something like a buffered bike lane or something with a barrier. So those are options that we will be exploring as we work on this document.
Okay, to go a little further with that, I noticed planted medians were one of the suggestions, and I would just, as a comment, say, if there's room for the planted medians, it would be great to see consideration of protected bike lanes instead of medians in the center of this road. One other thing about planted medians that I'll just make in terms of walking comfort is that it's really great when there is new planted materials as part of a project for them to benefit the spaces where people can go. Mm-hmm. Planted medians are really scenery, which is great, but considering how hot it can be on the sidewalk, it's nice to see when there are additions of plants made, especially shade trees, deciduous shade trees. So, so besides the website and the audits, is there any other outreach planned?
Correct. So hopefully after the audit, we'll have more information in terms of, and maybe in terms of feedback too, in terms of the types of improvements people want to see. And hopefully afterwards, we can take that information that we have and kind of see if there's a way for us to prioritize how we'll go ahead and to use those recommendations to come up with a list of improvements, and then from there, we'll want to go back to the community and let them know kind of what we found, and based on our research and the feedback that we received, how we'll incorporate those improvements into the draft plan. And like I said, there'll be several opportunities for the community to provide feedback on that draft plan before we go to the final plan. So our idea is not for us to make decisions in a vacuum. We really do want to get community feedback because this is a project that is going to benefit the members of the community, and so we do want to bring that idea of the sense of community, like you mentioned earlier, with shade trees and parklets, by creating a place for people to gather, rather than making it a very car-centric roadway that it is.
Oh, great. Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So you said you brought Andrew Ross? Just a quick question, just overall schedule, I guess. How far have you done so far? And after the next couple of meetings and outreach that you mentioned, what's the next step?
Do you mean in terms of the schedule? So I don't have like the schedule off the top of my head
Okay.
right now. At the moment, we are still on track to have a final plan by early summer of next year.
And all that funding is ready and available?
So we have funding available so we do have funding available for the planning portion, so for this planning document that we are working on. But our goal, so one of our goals for this planning document is that it'll really put all three partners, so for LA County, the cities of Glendale and La Cañada, Flint Ridge, to be in a really good position for us to apply for grant funding in the future. So we can say that we did a lot of work on this planning document. We had a lot of research. There's a lot of feedback, so this was a document that we created with the community, for the community. So we're hoping for that to help create opportunities for project construction.
Thank you, good job. Hopefully you still remember the question on the calls.
Sure. Would you like me to go ahead and answer that question?
Actually, I have him on hold. He called back. Would you like me to
We
answer?
can give them another opportunity to refer, yes, sure.
Of course. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Labriche. You are on the air.
Hello, can you leave my phone line open? It got disconnected last time.
Of course.
Okay, yeah, and would you like me to re-ask my question?
Please, sir.
Okay, yeah, my name's Don Labreche. I'm a lifelong resident of La Crescenta, the Glendale portion. I looked at the foothill plan. My neighbor is a traffic engineer for the city. He couldn't answer the question. I read something that said dedicated bike lane. We're talking about all through La Crescenta, incorporated, unincorporated, all the way to the LA City line at Lowell. Are there any plans to eliminate car lanes? And please don't disconnect me so I can hear the answer, please.
Sure. So our goal with this project, we do realize that people do need to drive and still need to get in their vehicles to get to other locations. So our goal for this project is not to eliminate any travel lanes or anything like that. We're hoping to be able to keep the travel lanes and include the improvements as well.
Okay, I have an observation. I ride a bicycle. I've ridden the bus plenty of times. I love riding the train. But if you're talking about a separation from the bicycle, now you've eliminated the parking in one of the photos that you showed. As far as the sidewalk, my input would be people are generally polite. If there's a wheelchair or stroller, we move aside. So if you're going to put a median in, you're squeezing lanes. And then if you put the barrier for the bike, you're squeezing lanes. So my concern is that most people to go shopping, to commute, we're in a car, and that's just the way it is right now. I understand the state wants everybody out of a car. They want you on a train. Everybody centrally located. We are spread out in this. San Bernardino Valley is a prime example. There's just a lot of people. There's a lot of people in the state, 40 million. I don't know if I'm sure you are aware, up at the YMCA in La Cañada, they have eliminated the lane. So what that does is make everybody merge and slows traffic, and they've eliminated parking, so everybody's going to park in the neighborhood now. I just do not see the need for it, and I think it's really not practical because we drive. We need to be cautious for pedestrians and bicyclists, but we drive our cars. Once we eliminate lanes, we'll never get them back.
Understood, and thank you for your comment. Like I mentioned earlier, we do understand that there is still several people, obviously, who live in the community that do drive in their cars. So our idea is not to remove people from their cars. We're trying to create a bit of a mindset and mode shift to people being more open to biking and walking. But no, our goal is not to remove the travel lane so that people won't be able to drive anywhere.
Okay, so that is not part of your plan. And when I read dedicated bus line, that dedicated bus lane will not take up a lane of car traffic.
Our project does not include a dedicated bus lane.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I read that. Well, that sounds great, and I think people need to be more aware. Bicyclists, I will tell you, I was on Descanso Drive yesterday. There's a huge bike lane, and the Sunday riders were taking up the entire roadway, everything. So I get it, but if bicyclists are careful, pedestrians are careful, make eye contact, we'll be a lot better off, and we won't have to, worry about, the driver. People do really need to drive, but I know there is a road diet agenda coming from the state, and there's a lot of money coming in, so that's good news. If you do plan to eliminate lanes in the future, will you notify the public?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, that's really not our intent, but if there is, so based on the feedback that we receive, if we do think that it may be an option or possibly beneficial to remove a travel lane to include some of these improvements, those are definitely options that we'll present to the community and definitely want community feedback on before we continue moving forward.
Okay, I appreciate that, because to be honest with you, I think most people want to keep the traffic lane. Most people are in cars up here, and the La Cañada elimination of a lane, most people didn't even know that was going to happen. I had to hunt for this meeting here, so this is something that really should go out on a ballot and the people vote on it if that decision is made. I thank you very much for your time, and best of luck to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. Maybe if you don't mind repeating one more time the website address and how they can post the comments and everything while we're still live and maybe he's still listening.
Sure. So it's pw.laccounty.gov/TPP/Foothill Boulevard ATP /.
Thank you. Thank you so much for presentation.
Thank you so much.
I think we're on agenda number 5, informational reports.
Go ahead and read that into the record, Tatiana, please.
Item 5, informational reports. Item 5A, informational report on the local roadway safety plan.
Mr. Chair, we have a short presentation that's going to be presented by our principal traffic engineer, Mr. Pastor Casanova.
Yes, just give me a second, trying to get this up here. Can you help me out with this?
Where's the slide? Which one is it?
Okay, apologies for the slight technical difficulty. Members of the commission, tonight's presentation I'll be presenting on is regarding the City of Glendale Local Roadway Safety Plan. And of course, we'll go here. Okay, so we'll go through a brief presentation outline and go, one of the first elements will be to discuss what a local roadway safety plan is, or LRSP, why we need the local roadway safety plan, as well as some benefits and the process. We're also going to discuss some of the stakeholder community outreach that was conducted as part of preparation of the plan, and go through some of the technical safety data that was reviewed, which included a review of citywide collision data or citywide collision analysis, as well as the development of a countermeasure toolbox. There's also going to be a colleague from Public Works will be presenting regarding a project website that was created that includes an interactive map, and as well as status and steps of the local roadway safety plan. So first, what is a local roadway safety plan? Well, it's a local level, data-driven traffic safety plan that's slated at reducing traffic accident fatalities and serious injuries on local public roads. This type of plan provides local agencies with the framework to systemically identify, analyze, and prioritize roadway safety improvements on local roads. In part, we need a local roadway safety plan because federal regulation requires at a state level that all states have a strategic highway safety plan. And the SHSP is a statewide traffic safety plan that's slated at reducing traffic accident fatalities and serious injuries, collisions on all public roads. At a state level, it includes federal, state, local, and private sector safety stakeholders, and it includes the 4 E's of traffic safety, which are engineering, enforcement, education, and emergency services. The local roadway safety plan is very similar to the state plan. However, it is on a local level. So it targets local traffic safety needs rather than statewide, and it includes local level stakeholders such as police, fire, schools, and local community groups. It also includes the 4 E's of traffic safety, and one of the key elements to mention are that the local roadway safety plan will now be a requirement from Caltrans for agencies to submit for the Highway Safety Improvement Program grant funding. Some of the benefits of, additional benefits of the local roadway safety plan is that it facilitates partnerships and collaboration between local stakeholders. It also results in a prioritized list of improvements and specific actions, and it takes a proactive approach to addressing the city's safety needs. It also demonstrates that local agency is taking a responsiveness to the safety challenges in the city, and as I mentioned in the previous slide, it qualifies the City of Glendale for submittal of future HSIP grant funding applications. Now, with all this information in hand and being targeted at reducing fatalities and serious injury collisions, it could be an integral part in moving forward towards the city's Vision Zero plan. Now, in this slide, it provides a graphical exhibit to better understand and simplify the various steps in the preparation of the local safety plan. So first, I just hit a button that identifies a red box on the screen, and since the first step is to identify the stakeholders. And in that identification process, it could include law enforcement, public health officials, emergency medical services, as well as elected officials. The next step down the local roadway safety plan roadway, if you want to call it, and the next guide sign, is the use of safety data. And in this stage, what it encompassed is researching and gathering all of the collision history data, maintenance logs, safety audits, as well as traffic violations. Those could be an element. And once this data is gathered, it is then analyzed citywide, and you try to locate challenge areas, if you want to call it, in terms of safety on our local roadways. And then the next step with that information in those challenge areas, you then move towards the next step, which would be choosing proven solutions. And we'll see in subsequent slides the term countermeasures used. And that's a typical term that's used in state guidelines and documents that, as the word would imply, it's a countermeasure. It's a measure targeted at countering particular safety issues and problems that we find. Those could include, as mentioned on the sign, chevrons, roundabouts, target enforcement, and crosswalks, and various types of public improvements. And then the final step, it indicates here, implementing the solutions. Those could be in the form of education, enforcement, or capital projects, such as building infrastructure improvements, as well as maintenance work. One key component between those two steps of choosing the proven solutions and implementing is also pursuing the grant funding, which this document helps position the City of Glendale on. So the stakeholders, which is the first step of the plan, included, in our case, the public officials, the City Council, presentation to the City Council, tonight's presentation to the Transportation and Parking Commission, with a teamwork between various departments and public works leading the effort with partner departments such as community development, our Beeline Transit representatives, police department, fire, Glendale Water and Power, and community services and parks. Together, these stakeholders team up to set the vision, mission, and goals of the plan. Other stakeholders that we identify here, we'll call that are external to the city, that are not departments, included the greater Glendale community, Metro, representing public transit, Glendale Unified School District, Glendale Community College, nonprofit organizations, neighborhood organizations, business associations, and hospitals. The community outreach component included preparation of a project website, and it's indicated on here. It's www.glendalesafestreets.com. And this will be discussed and presented by my colleague later on in this presentation. But the website includes project information, an interactive map, as well as an easy-to-use platform for feedback from the community and stakeholders. There is also various media blast information sent out via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, as well as links on the Public Works webpage to the project website. So now getting to the second step, which was the use of the safety data. And what this involved was a recent 5-year set of collision data citywide. And that data was analyzed and used to identify any potential collision trends, types, severity, categories, lighting conditions, just anything that really identified a trend. This information was also laid out geographically to see if there were not only any collision types or trends, but rather were there any particular locations where these types of fatalities and serious injury collisions were occurring. From that analysis, we identified various streets and intersections that presented some safety challenges, and that information is used to identify an emphasis area where we can target our funds and resources to address. And we developed a countermeasure toolbox. And through the use of these toolbox, developed safety projects to address those collision trends and risk patterns. On the screen is kind of a macroscopic view of some of the information that was retrieved from this analysis. On the upper two graphs, you'll see a pie chart and a bar graph. That gives us a really good snapshot, and you'll see in red on how the fatal and severe injury collisions compare to all of the collisions in the city. So fortunately, it is a small percentage. However, we're able to then get that information and take more of a microscopic view, which are the two bar graphs that you see at the bottom, with the bottom left representing, well, within that 1.22%, what is that looking like? So we're able to identify any patterns or types. For example, it separates it into head-on collisions, side swipes, rear ends, broadsides, and so on. The graph at the lower right gives us the time of day. So we're able to see, are these severe injury collisions occurring at a particular time of day? And we'll see on the red part, we do see an increase between the 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. slot. So another a very important element that's calculated with all of the collision data information is the collision severity index. And what this is used for, and we see the formula on the left side that gives a significant weight factor to fatal and severe injury collisions. And that information is calculated and used to prepare a citywide heat map. And we see on the map, we can easily just take a look at this map and see where those overrepresented areas may be in the city with higher than expected or desirable fatalities and serious injury collisions. The calculation also helps us set up a list to prioritize what locations should be looked at in order of their severity. So we see for a list of 14 intersections on the left, and we see on the right a map throughout the city. In this case, the 1 through 14 would be indicated by the red circles, which show the top locations with the highest severity index. This now is very similar, however, it targets the street corridors, for example, on X Street between Y and Z. And same thing, we're able to prioritize, see where those locations are with the highest severity index, map them out, so it gives us an indication visually where these problems may be occurring, as well as a list of priority locations. This now is a sample of what countermeasures can look like. It's not going to include all of the countermeasures in all situations, just a few to show you what, again, they look like. This is taken from the 2020 Caltrans Local Roadway Safety Manual, where it indicates countermeasure types and the types of safety challenges that they address. So the first one you'll see, SO2, is improving signal hardware, lenses, backplates, and so forth. And then there's a further description in the document that will describe what type of collisions those types of countermeasures will address. This is now just examples of what these countermeasures look like in the real world. Upper left, improving signal hardware, potentially improving the pavement type and friction factor, the installation of raised pavement markings, raised medians, countdown pedestrian indications, or leading pedestrian intervals. Here are some improvements that could be deployed now at non-signalized intersections, like additional lighting, improving the traffic control signage, improving the crosswalk pavement or pavement markings, or improving uncontrolled pedestrian crossings, including pedestrian hybrid beacons. And lastly, for the street corridors, there could be improved lighting, median barriers, guardrails, raised medians, median fencing, and road diets. Again, these are just examples of what are in the countermeasure toolbox. Now I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Saeed Rodsari, Traffic Engineer 2 in the Public Works Engineering Division, and he'll give us some more information on the project website. And Mr. Saeed? Mr. Rodsari.
Good evening, members of the commission. Let me go to the project website. Okay, my name is Said Rutsari. I'm a traffic engineering 2 for City of Glendale. We develop a project website for this project, local road safety plan called glendalesafestreets.com. And the purpose of this project is to just facilitate the public interaction and feedback from the publics and stakeholders for this project. I see that's easy to remember, glendalesafestreets.com. And you see the top is a home project overview, interactive map, project updates, provide feedback, and subscribe and contact. You can scroll down, or you can click on the tab. You can go to the project. Here's the project overview explaining the purpose of local road safety plan and all 4 E's we are using for this develop for road safety. And also we include Caltrans link for local road safety plan. This is a Caltrans link. If you want to see what a state level, somebody wants to know information about this California Department of Transportation regarding local road safety plan. Also, somebody interested to know the federal level. This is a Federal Highway Administration. You want to about the local road safety. It's all information is included here. Then we go to interactive map. This is a prominent tool of this website. I'll get back to it in a minute. Then project updates. We're going to the updated soon, all the project we have done so far for this project. Feedback, you can put your name, email, and subject, and without any limitation, you can provide your feedback, but we'll receive it. And other things is you can subscribe, put your name, your email, and phone, and subscribe. You can get all the notification on website updates and information. And also we create a specify safe streets at glendaleca.gov. You can communicate with us and share your concern about road safety in City of Glendale. Directly email. You can see all type of communication as a very facilitated and it's very easy to use for a general public to communicate and share their concern. Let's go to interactive map. And as a Windows open, as explaining how this tool works. Let's go to next. Okay, as you see, that's develop a City of Glendale map as a GIS base, and you can just, for example, I just want to give you an example. You just zoom in. For example, if you are living in like Glendale Avenue and Colorado, and you have a concern about the safety, you can just go ahead and drop your pin, and Windows popped up, and you can type your school crossing, a traffic signal, speeding, any type of concern you have, which is done, and we can receive your comments. Then, but if you have a concern regarding corridor or like a long stretch of the corridor, there's an option, draw a line. You can draw a line about your corridor, your concern. For example, you people speeding in your corridor, or you have traffic signals you're unhappy with, or school crossing, or anything. Just go. There's no limitation of character. You can write what your concern is and send us to us. It's done. Then go next. Do you have more traffic safety related concern? Yes. If you miss something, you go back automatically, and you can add more option, or you say no. And then just provide your name and email address as done. And let's continue. This is the demo of this project. Just Technically, we have provided 4 levels of communication as facilitate feedback from general public to communicate any type of safety issue, City of Glendale, they can share it with us and receive it. Okay, I want to pass to Mr. Casanova to continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Rotsari, and I know Mr. Rotsari worked really hard on putting this together with our consultant to make it as easy of a platform to communicate with the community and receive that feedback, which is very, very important to us. Okay, so on this last slide, we'll give you an update on where we are in preparation of the plan. The stakeholder coordination, it's nearing its end. We have had several stakeholder meetings, both with the internal departments with the city, external stakeholders, as well as community engagement. We have had a community presentation that was given that we broadcasted over YouTube. And we also have the project interactive website that has provided a platform for further input from both stakeholders and the community, as well as several flyers that were sent out via city social media, keeping the public abreast of the plan. And in terms of the plan itself, the citywide collision analysis has been completed. We have the data, we have the analysis results. We have some challenge intersections and street segments that we're aware of. We do have the stakeholder feedback that we're in the process of incorporating to make sure that all of this analysis and the projects we're generating is also cognizant of what the community and stakeholders have provided us in terms of their concerns and feedback. And we've also included other relevant city plans, such as the citywide pedestrian plan, the bicycle transportation plan, in context of the collision data that we're finding as well. And so now we're in the choosing proven solutions process, and that involves, again, looking at those countermeasures and seeing what sort of systemic projects we can identify and develop that can position us well to pursue future funding. And that's what the consultant is working on right now and putting those projects together. We're hoping to finalize, I'll call it the 2022 version of the local roadway safety plan, because we see this as a living document that will be updated, for next grant cycles. And lastly, of course, after it's all said and done, we do intend to pursue HSIP funding to implement some of these safety improvements that address fatalities and serious injury collisions in the city, and get those implemented in the real world. So that concludes the presentation, and I'd be glad to take any questions or comments.
Thank you so much. Great presentation, and I really like the toolbox. It looks pretty easy and very nice. So I'll open to my fellow commissioners for any questions.
Yes, thanks a lot. It is great to have all the data, to have the ability for people to have direct input like that. Looks fantastic. My question was, I took a minute to look at the California Highway Safety Improvement Program countermeasures list. And I just wonder if I saw a few things in there that appeared to me that their main purpose is to increase design speed, which doesn't seem like it's part of the safety mission. If I can read my notes here, things like, it was R02 recovery zone clearing, site triangles, widening lanes. These kind of things seem like their primary purpose is to make it safe to drive faster. And so I just wondered if there's going to be any selective process in picking which of these countermeasures the city will focus upon, given the dangers we know exist for all the modes, really.
Yes, Commissioner Lester, that's a very good observation. And I think the context we should look at this is that the California document you looked at on HSIP really looks at the state as a whole. And that's why in the early part of the presentation, we mentioned there's this statewide plan, right? So a lot of these countermeasures are to address some statewide issues like on rural roads where they need the runoff area and so forth. And I think that's where the need and the push to get a local level plan, which this is a local roadway safety plan, that can now target the safety needs at a local level. So if at our local level, what we're finding from the data is that we're having those issues with pedestrians and bicycles, which some of the data does lead towards that, is that we can choose those countermeasures that address those issues and not necessarily the ones that are prominent in other areas of the state.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Bonston, and I appreciate your question. I also was curious about the countermeasures, and it's good to know that they'll be refined to really address the issues that Glendale has. I want to also commend the presentation and the website. I think that looks terrific. I'm curious to know where we are. I know that there's this stakeholder feedback is ongoing. I'm hoping there continues to be opportunity for that. I would love to promote, let people know about this as well, because you do hear constituents, members of the public for Glendale being very concerned about safety for pedestrians and bicyclists, and knowing that there's a way in which you can really specifically put your concerns. There's often on social media kind of commentary about accidents that happen. And looking to identify where this is happening is part of the solution. So I really appreciate the work that's being done. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. And I like to echo exactly what was said here, the platform. And I'm just wondering how long it's been active.
We received the grant funding in 2019, began in around 2020, that's when COVID hit, and kind of slowed down how we were going to put the project together in terms of stakeholder outreach. Again, we wanted to make sure we had that outreach available. Also in some of the data, it slowed down some of the data coming from the state level. But we really got going in 2021, which is when we did all the stakeholder outreach, getting the data analyzed and extending into 2022. So we are at the tail end. We'd like to get this finalized because Caltrans, it's anticipated they'll be rolling out on the next cycle of Highway Safety Improvement Program funding in the next few weeks. However, it does not mean that plan is locked in. And again, I think this is going to be more of a living document that will be updating in subsequent cycles. And also, Commissioner Bonston, you mentioned about the web page. We are looking at opportunities, even though this web page was developed for this project, to see if there's any way that we can keep it more long-term to get that continual feedback from the public.
So have you actually got any feedback on the website yet, or hasn't started any?
We have. I don't have the numbers here, but we have gotten feedback. It's working. Yeah.
Good.
Try it out tonight.
I'm going to go try it, actually. Yes, I will. Thank you. On HSIP funding, do you need to specify a specific project to go after it, or based on this report, you can go after HSIP funding?
They are specific projects, but part of the development of this report was to come up with some application-ready projects. So that is part of the this engagement, if you want to call it.
So off of those 14 that you showed, you will pick one or two and you'll go after the funding, or you'll go after funding for all of them?
Yeah, the intent of I know Caltrans and the local roadway safety plan is to look for those systemic issues. So say within those 14, are there these systemic ones that we can maybe across the board implement at all 14 that can address those systemic issues?
Great idea. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks again. Any other additional questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Our next item, Chairperson Pro Tem Nazarian, is item 5B, Safety Measures Implementation and Overview. It's another informational report.
Just as a quick introduction, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. This was one of the questions that was brought up at our last meeting, so we brought a report back for your commission to report on that. And Mr. Sarkis Oganessian, our acting city engineer and deputy director of public works, will be presenting it.
Thank you, Mr. Imrani. Good evening, Commissioner, Chair Pro Temp Nazarian, and members of the commission. At our last meeting on February 28th, I believe Commissioner Bonston asked for us to bring back a safety measures and implementation overview report to you guys. And so this report in front of you is a fairly detailed report that outlines the various processes that we go through when developing our capital improvement program. And as part of that capital improvement program, we go through the planning, design, construction, and construction management phase, which considers various safety measures as they relate to pedestrians, bicyclists, and the various modes of transportation. For instance, to highlight some of the master plans, we have the citywide pedestrian master plan that was adopted by City Council in 2021, which we look at. We have the bicycle transportation plan, which was adopted in 2012 and is currently under study to be updated, and that's about due in about approximately 1 year. We have the pavement management program, which was adopted in 2021. We have the Green Streets Manual, which was created in 2015 and is a living document which undergoes updates as necessary. We just heard about the local road safety plan, which will be finalized in the near term, but that's also a living document that will be updated as we go forward. We have our neighborhood traffic calming program, the Safe Routes to School program, which we've been implementing since 2010 with the start of the Safe Routes to School Phase 1 improvements project that took place in local schools around the neighborhood, and we did 4 phases of the Safe Routes to School program to date. We have various Glendale community plans, ranging from the North Glendale Community Plan, South Glendale Community Plan, West Glendale, and the Downtown Specific Plan. We currently have a sidewalk installation policy that is ongoing to determine where we can install and infill missing sidewalk areas as they're requested or during our capital improvement projects. We have traffic signal and flashing beacon priority ranking lists as necessary as they meet certain warrants. We have a creative crosswalk installation initiative recently adopted by council. We have a heat island removal initiative where we look for opportunities to reduce the heat island effect that's caused by global warming by removing impermeable surfaces and replacing them with permeable surfaces or expanding our urban forest. We have an intersection realignment initiative that takes place with all our projects to make intersections safer, more at a 90-degree intersection alignment. We have our wastewater master plan adopted in 2020, and we currently have a storm drain master plan update ongoing through a request for proposals that should be released shortly to the public. Since 2020, this would have been a much longer list had we gone back numerous years, but we kept it from 2020 and on. We had approximately 7 projects completed that addressed multiple modes of transportation and safety initiatives were implemented as part of those projects. In 2021, we had another 7 projects that accounted for various multimodal improvements. Currently to date, in 2022, up until the end of this month, we've completed 4 projects, and we're currently underway in approximately another 4 to 5 projects in construction. We also have ongoing projects for next fiscal year as part of our capital improvement program. Approximately 10 of those projects are listed on the report, and those will also address various safety improvements for different modes of transportation. When it comes to communicating the various improvements to the public, we have a pretty detailed process, which we're always looking to improve as we go on and as we learn from previous projects. We have a very detailed website that details each project and the current phase of the project that it is in. It also highlights the staff that is associated with that project, so the public can contact, email, as necessary. During the actual project design phase, we meet with the community. We host virtual community meetings as of late due to the evolving pandemic situation. And once plans are approved by City Council, they're also hosted on our website for the public to comment on. And during construction, the public actually receives numerous notice when construction is ongoing in their area. So with that, if there's any questions or specific details you would like, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Doesn't sound like you guys had enough to do. Thank you so much. It was a great report, so I'll open up for any questions, commissioners.
Well, yes, I'll just start by saying I reviewed the document and made a ton of notes myself. I was just very impressive list. It was really, I really appreciate you coming back and presenting to us. Clearly comprehensive and really addressing by a number of both initiatives and plans. So it's really nice to see that all in one place. I'm glad to know that you are doing outreach with it too. I guess, I suppose a follow-up question to this would be, I know that we have certain elements that are required in the California state. So we have a safety element of which I imagine, is that separate? I guess this is my question. Is the safety element separate from the plans that you've presented here? We also have things like the land use element, which I imagine is addressed through community plans. Just out of curiosity, if the safety element, how is that implemented within the city of Glendale?
So the safety element is implemented within the various projects as that project is designed. Actually, it goes further back, or goes much earlier to the pre-approval process and basically the overarching project overview. And once we determine the project scope, we determine and we look into requests we've received. We look into corridors that need safety improvements that have been highlighted, and we basically design them during the entire design process all the way up until the construction process where we actually build the improvements. So safety elements are considered throughout the entire life of the project, from basically A to Z, from implementation all the way into construction.
Thank you.
Lester?
Sure, thank you, and thanks for the great presentation. I was going through, one of the things I noticed was the sidewalk installation policy and development, which is exciting. There's a few places I can think of. I was wondering about some signal questions, just again, given the sort of relationship between vehicle speed, danger to other modes, and crash danger for cars. There was a traffic signal priority ranking list and signal synchronization, that kind of thing. But in specifically with, I'm wondering if the city has plans to add lots more signals, or if it is at a fairly stable state. Just because there is like I say, there's a lot to be said for stop signs in terms of the other modes. So I'm interested in that. Well, yeah, I'll just ask that question for now.
Thank you, Commissioner Lester. So I can say confidently that there's approximately a handful left of traffic signals to install, new signals that is, that have met the METCD warrants for installation. Our city's fairly built out and fairly improved, so approximately about a handful left if we identify funding for it, and if it is the council's directive to proceed with the installation of those new signals.
Okay, thanks. There was, just a question about the website. Is it updated regularly? I was looking at it and it seemed like a lot of the dates that were on some of the projects were a ways back in time.
So it's GlendalePWProjects.com, and it's actually updated on a monthly basis.
Oh, really?
There's 3 sections. There is a current upcoming and a completed. So if you look at the current projects, all the dates are updated on a monthly basis. You may have been referring to a completed project section that had a recently completed project with a date that was in the past, but that would be fitting for a completed project section.
Okay, thank you.
You're good, Commissioner Lester?
I am, thank you.
Thanks again for putting that comprehensive list. It's really good resource for future too. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Chairperson Pro Tem. We need a motion and a second to note and file this report. And actually, once that's been accomplished, we needed one for the previous item as well. So once we accomplish the motion, would you please request to go back, and then we can do that one as well?
Can we do the motion for both at the same time?
No, we have to do them separately.
Okay, so we do the first one first?
Do the one that we're on first,
Sure.
and then we can request to go back.
Okay.
Commissioner Bonston, delighted to present a motion to receive and file this fine report.
I'll second that.
Okay, I'll take roll call. Chairperson Pro Tem Nazarian,
Yes.
Commissioner Lester,
Yes.
Commissioner Bonston.
Yes.
Thank you.
And now if you would just request that we return to the previous item so we can do the same thing. Thank you.
Sure. So we're ready to make the motion?
You're looking at me. Do we go in order backwards? How many motions? How many? One more. The
Correct. This would be
safety
the informational report to the local roadway safety plan.
Yes, that one. I am delighted to also make a motion to receive and file. Commissioner Bonston.
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call. Chairperson Pro Tem Nazarian,
Yes.
Commissioner Lester,
Yes.
Commissioner Bonston.
Yes.
Thank you.
And one final thing, Tatiana, if I can make an announcement. Actually, this coming Sunday, May 1st, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., we're going to have a bike audit on North Brand Boulevard between Glen Oaks and Mountain Street. That's part of an upcoming project that is currently in the design, conceptual design phase. It is a demonstration project on North Brand Boulevard to study multimodal improvements, such as protected bicycle lanes and pedestrian safety improvements that we were just talking about. So it seems fitting to make that announcement here. We'll also be bringing forward an item in a future agenda regarding that specific project. So right now we're in the data collection phase. So I just wanted to make that announcement to people watching so that they can be aware and everyone is free to participate. And the project website would actually be updated tomorrow to include a flyer in both Spanish, Armenian, and English to highlight the details of that.
Thank you.
Okay, we will be moving on to item 5C, Streetcar Feasibility Study Final Report.
Mr. Chair, this is a final report for this item that's going to be presented by Bradley Calvert, Assistant Director for Community Development Department.
Am I sharing from this screen?
Mr. Calvert, I'm going to share
Okay,
the
thank you.
PowerPoint.
Thank you, and good evening, Commission members. We are here to provide a report on the final report for the streetcar feasibility study. We've brought this back a couple times to the TPC, but we're preparing to take this to City Council to seek direction. So tonight, we're looking for any feedback that the Commission may want to provide regarding this feasibility study. Not a whole lot of brand new information in this report from prior visits, but if you happen to not be here in those prior presentations, this is a good chance to get caught up to speed. Just a little bit of background information. A number of years back, City Council asked to study the feasibility of a downtown streetcar. We had received some regional support funding. City matched that. And really just to identify what's the potential for ridership, impacts to any infrastructure, streets, how would this be configured, any potential route alternatives, and then looking at kind of a high-level cost estimate. So again, feasibility study, there's a lot more to dig into this if council directs us to proceed further. So what I'd like to do is kind of provide some background information and then really where we are today with this report. We're going to go over some of the route alternatives. There were 2 that were identified as part of this project, looking at some of the stop locations, what those stop configurations would look like, potential ridership, parking impact, and then cost. So if you look at the first alternative, this is what we refer to as our loop configuration. This really starts at the Larry's Area and Transportation Center, and that's the ultimate goal of the streetcar, to connect the Larry's Area and Transportation Center to downtown, to our employment center, really kind of serving that first last mile connectivity. This configuration runs bi-directional along Central until it gets around Lomita. This isn't quite determined which street that this would cross over or would kind of wrap around on. But as it runs north, I'm sorry, I actually misspoke on that. That's alternative 2. This runs north along Central, and then as it gets to Stocker, wraps around south. So this is a bi-directional on Central up until around Lomita. Then it continues one way north and then comes back around one way south. This alternative mitigates some of the kind of impacts to the infrastructure. Right? This is spreading it out. It's not concentrated on Central. It's not concentrating on Brand. It's kind of doing a little bit of an equal distribution, if you will. There are about 9 stations, 9 pairings really, that would come through. So this would actually represent 18 total stations. This would impact parking on both Brand and Central. And both of these alternatives, what would happen with the parking in Brand is a reconfiguration from the angle parking that's there today to parallel parking. So that's where we see some pretty significant impacts to parking along Brand. It's not as easy to estimate on Central. We do have kind of high level numbers. Not all of those parking spaces are actually marked out along Central, some of the curbside parking that's there. And we'll go through kind of those overall impacts. If we're looking at a section of the street, the top image, the existing conditions, this is along Brand, and then the bottom image is the proposed conditions. So this would run curbside on the southbound lane along Brand. This would be a shared lane with automobile traffic. It would not have just a dedicated lane in its own right. And then if we're looking along Central, this would actually be on the outside of some of the parking. In some cases, it would actually replace the parking. It really depends on kind of the location moving up and down Central. One of the alternatives that this does present, though, as we look at infrastructure such as existing bicycle lanes, is an opportunity to kind of go back and revisit what we've done and see if we can have kind of a dig once philosophy, if you will. Identify any other improvements that we could make that are part of the bicycle plan, part of the pedestrian plan. But again, one way up Central, coming back down on Brand. Now, this isn't necessarily the most preferred alternative, as we've heard from the public and then through our own analysis. And one of the reasons why is kind of how intuitive this is for a user. So just kind of using the Americana as an example where that red dot is, let's say I'm somebody not from Glendale. I am not familiar with the city. I am not familiar with the streetcar. This is going to drop me off at the station just outside of the Galleria. If I'm not from here and I'm not very familiar, odds are I may find myself going right back to that same station where I was before. And this is kind of stuck. There we go. I would likely go back to that station, not knowing that there's another one on the other side. What ends up happening is that person kind of gets taken for a ride, right? Their trip time is going to be more than double at that point. It's not quite as user intuitive. We looked at the Atlanta streetcar actually as an example. That's what they had to do with theirs. They were really limited in right-of-way, and it required a loop configuration. And what they found is a lot of out-of-town visitors who are visiting Olympic Centennial Park, MLK's birthplace, they're getting to the wrong locations and then having to basically spend twice as much time on that streetcar. So that's one of the disadvantages of alternative 1, the loop configuration. High-level ridership estimate, this is between 1,400 and 3,800 riders per day. Construction cost is estimated between $250 to $300 million, and then operation costs would be about $7 million per year. At the end, I'll talk a little bit about why there's also a different number in the report. The full report was actually attached to the packet if you had a chance to review that, and talk about what some of the differences are in the delta between those numbers. And this is just a rendering, an example of what that streetcar could look like running curbside along Central there. Alternative 2 is what we call the bidirectional, and this is one where it moves north-south along Central and then around Lomita. That's where it cuts east and then moves up Brand, still bidirectional. This is the most straightforward configuration. It kind of eliminates that user intuitiveness need of maybe going to the wrong station. This is much more easy to figure out if you're not familiar with the system, if you're not familiar with Glendale. Again, same number of stations overall. These are just paired along Brand and Central together. In this configuration section, this is the section through Brand. You can see top level existing, proposed at the bottom. This would eliminate parking along that southbound lane. The northbound lane would actually see a reconfiguration into parallel parking from the angle parking that is there today. Again, we'll go through what some of those impacts are. You see that there's also some modifications to the overall lane widths as well to make sure the streetcar fits into that space. And then Central, again, similar configuration here. In this case, the section that we're cutting through actually preserves some of the parking that is along Central. And then if we look at a rendering in downtown, this is coming up Brand. This is kind of a typical configuration, what we could expect, and then one of the stations directly behind it there. And I'll show some plans of the two different kind of station configurations that we're looking at. This actually anticipates to have a little bit higher ridership, really because this is our primary commercial and entertainment core. There are more residential units on Central, but being that this could also serve a lot of people from out of town who are visiting places like the Americana, Alex Theater, things of that nature. Again, running right through our spine of our employment core. Construction cost is roughly the same here. Operation cost is a little bit cheaper. And really that's because there's just a little bit more efficiency in consolidating that along one street instead of two. But the downside to that is the significant impacts that would occur to Brand, being that we would have to dig up both sides of those streets. And as I'll mention a little bit later on, that kind of delta in terms of that overall cost, which starts to tip over $400 million, is to start to deal with some of the unexpected things that we may find along Brand, especially since streetcars used to run there at one point in time. This is a typical bump out station. This essentially would create an extension of the sidewalk. These would be level with the floor of the streetcar. They would have things like shelters, ticketing machines. There are opportunities to incorporate public art into this as well. The other configuration is really those kind of curbside along the sidewalk. Again, still having the same kind of amenities. There's an inset image there of the Atlanta streetcar actually. You can see there's a shelter in the background there and things like trash cans and ticketing machines located there. So kind of summarize, both of these have the same length. Obviously, same number of stations. Construction cost is anticipated to be roughly the same. There's a little less than $1 million difference in terms of that operating cost. Again, some efficiency in being able to be on that one corridor rather than two. You can see the ridership is a little bit higher just by going up Brand. This also avoids any potential conflicts with the BRT. Right now, that preferred alternative for Metro's NoHo to Pasadena BRT actually comes down Central, so that avoids the bidirectional route that goes up Central and then cuts across to Brand would avoid any conflicts with the BRT on Central. That loop configuration does impact less parking in general. 90 to 94 spaces is estimated. Alternative 2, going north and south on Brand, would be between 153 and 157 parking spaces. And again, some of that loss is from having to convert those parking spaces from angled to parallel. We estimate there's somewhere around a 30% loss just from that alone. Travel time, roughly the same. You can see AM, PM, and then off-peak are those three numbers that are there. Alternative 1, Alternative 2 are the same on AM, and this is for the full length of the route. So that's going all the way from from Larry Zarian Transportation Center all the way up to Stocker. You can see about a 1 minute longer there on the bidirectional route and just a little bit less if you're going on off-peak time, say weekends or midday. So average ridership, again, that's a pretty large number. We would need to dig further into this in any additional phase. What we have found, though, is that the anticipated ridership is nestled kind of right in the middle of the other kind of precedent examples that we looked at. Some are a little bit above Seattle South Lake Union streetcar and just a little bit below of Seattle's First Hill streetcar. So somewhere between that kind of DC, Tampa, Milwaukee range, anywhere between just a shade under 2,000 and then almost 4,000. You see Kansas City at the top is kind of an outlier. In many ways, they are the gold standard of streetcars in the United States. Much to learn from them. In some of these cases, what we're also seeing is that the ridership tended to be a little bit higher because it also served as kind of a redevelopment catalyst. That's one of the benefits of the streetcar, is that it provides a higher level of permanence, if you will, but it's also less flexible, less mobile in terms of changing. If we don't see those kind of ridership numbers, and you see that Atlanta's and Cincinnati's are ranked kind of low there, that's a pretty heavy investment to not realize the kind of ridership that I think both of those were anticipating seeing. So in kind of the next iteration of this, if council directs us to, we would dig into this a little bit deeper to better understand travel patterns, travel behaviors, try to refine that number and get a better understanding of what those estimates would be. Some additional considerations. There is going to need to be an operations and maintenance facility. The study looked at various locations. It did kind of zero in on the Larry Zarian Transportation Center. There's some conflicts that could exist there. One, we do need to maintain parking there. That doesn't preclude that we could not have an OMF facility here, but we would still need, if that were the case, we would need to replace any lost parking that's there. We have to maintain the parking that is at that location. There are plenty of examples that have done that. Seattle Sound Transit in Bellevue, Washington, their station, they have an OMF facility there, actually a mixed-use development with parking still present. So there are ways to do it that may change some of that cost, and that again is why we kind of have that delta between that 300 million and 400 million, is that there's some unknowns here in terms of identifying the OMF facility. And then some of the other things that are kind of accounted for is obviously this is a pretty long-term project, and we're in some very early stages here. Construction costs could go up. Having worked on the Atlanta streetcar, we'll probably find when we start digging up any street, there's going to be a lot of other things in there that we didn't know, we weren't aware of. Having worked on the Atlanta streetcar, what we found when we were digging up the street in downtown Atlanta was the old streetcar tracks that were there. Those all had to come out, and it raised the cost by about $90 million. So we're trying to put in a little bit of a cushion, a little bit of a buffer in there, if you will. Another conflict that needs to be resolved a little bit here is we look at projects like Space 134, and City Council actually directed us to proceed with that study, but also throw in kind of a third alternative, which would be this kind of enhanced bridge that could be over Central or Brand. So not a full-on lid park, but kind of an extension of the bridge. It would create open space, pedestrian, bicyclist facilities. But that project identified essentially a transit hub. With the BRT coming down Central, and then if the bi-directional alternative is the preferred alternative and that goes up Brand, you're going to have two kind of distinct transit hubs, and that may need to be reconciled in some fashion or another. And that's something that between any advanced study on this and moving into any next phase with Space 134, we would try to sort that out. And then there's the phase 2 impacts. This is intended to be the first phase, the first study, or first phase of the study. There's potentially a second phase which would look at carrying that streetcar out on Glen Oaks to Burbank. With the BRT coming, that is something, again, that we would need to reconcile if we were to move forward with any additional phases to this and any additional analysis. There's a bit of a redundancy that exists there. There's going to be space limitations. As you know, the BRT is actually taking out a lane of traffic on Glen Oaks. We'll be upgrading some bicycle infrastructure, but that's going to create some potential conflicts unless the BRT and the streetcar can share space. Next steps, what we'd like to do is obtain feedback from the TPC this evening. We will factor those comments into our final council report. Right now, we're anticipating going on May 24th to City Council. We're going to seek direction from City Council if they'd like to move on to the next phase of this. That would start to conduct engineering analysis, environmental review. There is still design refinement that would need to be done. The locations of the stations, the precise locations are not settled. This is really kind of looking at a block by block situation. There's still more to understand in terms of that parking, if there are opportunities to mitigate any of those impacts and lost spaces. Again, the cost still pretty high level. We really need to zero in on this OMF facility and where that can go. And then kind of honing in on that ridership number. So if council directs to proceed with that, these are some of the things that we would anticipate seeing in that kind of next round of the study. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. So in general, you are looking for some feedback for the council meeting, next council meeting?
Correct. We would like to be able to factor that into the report and pass that along to City Council.
Okay. Commissioners?
Sure. Thanks very much. I personally see like a lot of appeal in the idea of a streetcar. You know, my understanding of the history of Glendale is that generally its built environment is formed around the, you know, the right-of-way created by the Pacific Electric. And so there's already a structure in place for a line running in this area. But I was trying to think over the pros and cons. I was also trying to figure out, you know, if the main purpose is to connect the transportation center with downtown, you know, what specifically would this system offer that the B line doesn't offer? It looks like the headways are fairly similar. And I don't discount the appeal of a streetcar. Like when I look at the pictures, I'm like, that looks so cool, you know? And I also think there is one thing I thought of, which is bicycles. And if bicycles were allowed on the streetcar, there's level boarding apparently. And that is one thing buses don't do well, is accommodate bicycles. So, you know, there's this question. And also looking into this item, I did a little bit of research and, you know, in particular, I believe it was Kansas City. Kansas City apparently created like sorry if I can read my notes, like a transport development district, and actually was able to get a lot of the cost paid for by the direct and greatest beneficiaries of the streetcar. And the reason was because streetcars' utility is not that high in terms of moving people. You have one or two cars, you have mixing with traffic. You can't move a lot of people very fast. It's not mass transit, you know. But it did show, there does appear to be a lot of evidence that it is incredibly good as a development tool. So the question is, you know, what percentage of this route would make it a great option in that way? There's that. And I guess, you know, my last comment would just be that, you know, I'm very interested in seeing downtown Glendale served by transit. So we have this transportation center. It doesn't serve downtown, so I understand the reason behind this, but the question is whether or not, so we have BRT coming, and that's an east-west corridor, which is mass transit. If the BRT is implemented correctly, that will move a lot of people if you look at the numbers for what's going on in the valley. And I guess the question is whether a streetcar might impact Glendale's willingness or ability to basically pursue mass transit to the south, should that ever become a consideration. It's my understanding, for example, that the West Santa Ana branch has some language in its documentation that talks about a terminus in Glendale. I believe Eco Rapid Transit is a group that is Glendale's involved with on that. So I know that's outside of the streetcar, but there would be the issue of thinking of other ways to connect to the south that are mass transit. So that would be my comment on it. Yeah, that's my comment for now.
Hi, this is Commissioner Bonston. I have several questions, and I'm hoping that they come out in some cohesive form. I think I've labeled them where to go first. I'll start with saying I really appreciate the maps that you showed today. I think the report itself is more wordy, and as a maps person, as a visual person, it was so helpful to see the two alternatives laid out. I think along those lines, and kind of speaking to what you were getting at too, understanding the connections to both BRT and the transportation center kind of that on a map, I think would be very valuable. I'm having a hard time visualizing what that looks like in terms of the pros and cons in connection to the BRT. You kind of mentioned, addressing whether it's a block separation, kind of what that looks like. I wonder if council would benefit from that. I do think, I also was wondering about, you mentioned redevelopment catalyst, and I see that in the presentation. I see that as a draw for this. I think I was struggling also with, if it's a potential for a development catalyst, I think what would be interesting to see, if we're investing this much money in it, what is the money that comes out and the redevelopment potentially as a result of it? And then are we then, who is it serving? And I think you started off and perhaps talked a little bit about visitors to Glendale, and that's a different format than the Glendale residents. And so I think maybe it's both things, but it feels like it's either a development catalyst or it is a little bit conflicting or competing with what we have with the B line. So I'm kind of interested to hear a little bit more the rationale on that. I have a random note that says "Go Kansas City." Amazing facts there. So thank you for that. And then I guess I have two other questions that are also slightly unrelated. I was curious why you didn't select brand further south. And in my mind, I answered the question by thinking, well, maybe it's about the land uses, and the existing, there's like all auto dealerships, which is not to say that there won't be users on, light rail going there. But, and I think you kind of answered it with what is underground for brand. But it is such a broad and wide street that I can see a lot of value, but I also see a lot of value in connecting the land uses on Central. And then I guess my final question / comment is just lessons learned from what downtown LA, the legacy of kind of looking for the streetcar there, financing, funding issues, just long-term delay, like if you've looked at lessons learned from that.
All right, let's see if I can remember all these and go through them. Actually, going to both your comment and Commissioner Lester, the development catalyst, redevelopment catalyst, I don't think that is as much in play here as it was in, say, Kansas City or even Atlanta. Kansas City, that was an area that needed to be built out. So it really functioned as kind of an economic development tool. Did the same thing in Atlanta as you kind of moved east. It kind of stabilized the neighborhood and brought in a lot of redevelopment and unfortunately some gentrification along with it. I don't think that's something we're really looking at here. We don't have a lot of vacant sites left. We do have some key ones along Central, but I wouldn't expect this to catalyze a lot of redevelopment. This is really going to come down to whether or not there is a desire to replace the existing ridership of the B line with the streetcar, and if there's a trade-off and a value in doing that. In terms of lessons learned, yes, we have looked at a number of different examples. I kind of highlighted a few there in terms of the challenges that they've had. We have been trying to gather some information from Los Angeles. We've actually had some meetings with a few of them that have worked on that streetcar to get some of their feedback, because funding is going to be a pretty significant challenge, and identifying where we can get that funding from. And again, asking that question, is it worth that trade-off? Regarding who this is for, or actually, let me go back to the South brand. That really is about the land uses that are there. Auto retailers, there's not at that rate, we would be taking our transit users and taking them right down the corridor to go buy a new car, and I don't know if that's something we would want to encourage. So it really is kind of about the land uses there. You can move south and hit a lot of multifamily and commercial if you shift over to Central as you move down to the transit center. Did I cover all of? Did I miss any in there?
I think you covered most. I think, it is interesting about the brand. I mean, unless you were thinking that was a redevelopment area, which is something that kind of came to my mind in terms of uses. But you answered the questions. Oh, gosh. Oh, yeah. I guess, if it's not a redevelopment catalyst, then I think looking at what I think that you were getting at too is this idea of value capture, like who helps pay for it? Well, it sure is helpful if it's bringing money in redevelopment, having developers help pay for it as part of a value capture scheme. That sounds like less likely, which I think goes back to funding. These are very, very expensive projects. And I certainly hope that we continue to increase our ridership with the Beeline, and that this would be well received in terms of ridership. Thank you. I think you addressed all my random questions in strange order.
Thank you, Commissioners. It was a nice refresher for me also to see the progress and where we are. I can't even remember last time we talked about it. Probably was over a year ago, maybe. I can't remember when.
July 2019, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
It's been a
Yeah, I
while.
wasn't here.
Oh, my
It's been a
gosh.
while.
Okay. Okay, so it was pre-COVID. Okay. Kansas City, that's bi-directional, isn't it? Or it's...
Yes, I believe it was. yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I've used that twice I was there, and it was good. I didn't realize it was such an important compared to all the other cities. So I was leaning toward that just personally. I like that better than single, but then I'm thinking about all the BRT conflicts and everything. So I think that's a major impact. And I feel like if we stay out of each other's ways, maybe that's a better route to go. I am concerned with the cost, obviously, but that's something that hopefully our council members will consider and make sure that this is the value that, brings, considering the Beeline and what we have and that ridership that we're hoping to get where we are seeing that. No guarantee there. If we do this, hopefully it's better than that. But that's a massive, and our cost estimate, I think those numbers are probably old, like everything else construction-wise, past 2 years, you know how that happened. So those are just some concerns I have, and also losing all the parkings. I mean, that was a concern I had when I saw this first time, whenever it was, prior to 2019, and still a concern. I mean, parking is a major issue on Brand, and now with this losing another 100 stalls, it's even a bigger issue, I believe, to me, for all those businesses and everything. So those are the feedbacks I have: parking, conflict with BRT, overall cost, and if this really brings the value that we're hoping it will, and all the construction that it's going to take probably 4 or 5 years to build this. So with that, if there's no additional comment, question?
Okay, I do have one. This was my random other question, but why not Metro? Like, why is this the city of Glendale? I know that we have our own Beeline. Why not why us?
Well, it would be local to Glendale. It would only operate within Glendale's city limits, and that's really the primary reason behind that. So, and if I could actually go back and touch on one thing that I forgot to mention earlier with the parking impacts. Very early on, we looked at the opportunity of maybe running that up the center of Brand, much like the old red cars that did. The feedback we got from the public was to not do that, as they really kind of, I heard the discussion earlier about medians. They really kind of treasured the median that was there, and they did not want to see that disturbed. So that's something that can still be investigated and looked at if we were to dig further into this, but that is why it does run curbside and not center.
If I may, just one other thing I forgot to ask. On the very north, I don't even remember last time seeing this. Where are we turning this around and coming back?
So the bi-directional, you wouldn't actually have to turn it around. Essentially, what would happen is the two tracks would meet. The operator would then go to the other side of the car and then come back south. Now with the loop alternative, that actually does turn on, I believe it's on Stocker, and comes back around. And that's actually a good point to bring, is that the loop configuration presents a number of additional turning conflicts that don't exist as much with the bi-directional.
Okay, thank you so much.
Are you looking for specific feedback about the alternatives from us?
If you have preferences, that would be helpful. Yes, alternative 1, alternative 2.
I thought the items that you mentioned in terms of alternative 2 were very compelling. I think my only reservation, again, with the BRT, wanting to make sure that it was a fluid connection. I'm kind of looking at it selfishly, thinking how eventually can I get from my home to downtown, where I commute, and loving the idea of a connection to the transportation center. Is that what I'm calling it, the right thing? Glendale?
There's
Yes.
area and transportation center.
Yes.
And then there's the consideration of kind of hubs around 134. I'll say that the bi-directional doesn't have that same conflict with the BRT because it is running on the parallel street on Brand, not Central.
And what would a stop, like, it connects well with it, though, I guess is my question. Like, not so much the conflict, but can users get off of one and get onto another?
Within a block of each other, yes. There are many creative ways we could look at in terms of trying to bridge that gap, but that would need to
But
be
we're
studied.
not to that, yeah.
Exactly, we're not quite there yet.
That's fine. Thank you.
I was just gonna ask too, so if we were discussing the alternatives, is it possible to do alternative one without potentially impacting BRT?
Yes, I mean, figuring out how they're going to share the space is going to be the challenge on Central. So we would likely have to have a shared lane. Both BRT and streetcar would need to operate in that. That could present some challenges in its own right. I don't think there would be enough right away that we could consume to have both a BRT and a streetcar running parallel. Not to mention there's a bit of redundancy that's in that as well.
One more thing about Commissioner Bonston's question about the lower section of Brand, which I think of dealerships, and at least in my own experience, is often dropping your car off for repairs and needing a ride. Most of them run shuttle services. Was there no interest on the boulevard of cars to have this hosted in that area?
There was not. That was early on in the study. Again, that's something we could always revisit in terms of refining and see if we could re-engage their interest.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Once again, we need a motion to note and file this as well as report to the council with your feedback.
I'd like to make a motion to note and file and provide, and we already provided feedback, yes.
Yeah, that's correct. And the motion is good, but just because we don't have a written one this time, I'm going to clarify for the record, if I may. This, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a motion to note and file the streetcar feasibility study final report and provide your feedback to the council.
Correct. That is a motion.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I'll second.
Just nodding, beautifully said. And I third it.
Okay, I will take roll call. Chairperson Pro Tem Nazarian,
Yes.
Commissioner Bonston,
Yes.
Commissioner Lester.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much again. I think we're item number 6, oral communication.
Yes, item 6, oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or discussion. And we have no callers at this time.
Okay. Thank you. So then we will move on to item number 7, I guess commission staff comments, updates.
Mr. Chair, staff has no comments.
Thank you, Mr. Imrani. And then with that, I guess we can make a motion for adjourn.
Item 8, adjournment.
I'll make a motion.
I second.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Meeting.